Hey guys, Genesis and Ray from Vagabond Nerds sat down to have a discussion about DC Comics, but they had a few technical difficulties. Apparently they don't know how to act when I'm not here. So if you want to watch the whole video, you can, but feel free to jump ahead 2 minutes if you want to get to the good stuff.
I think we're live.
I think you are live.
I think it's working.
You think it's working?
I think it's working.
Man, when was the last time you were on here?
When was I ever on here?
Oh, okay, never mind, man.
That is the question. So I have no idea what I'm doing right now. Last time I did an ANX Versus show, I had no idea how to do the intro either. I'm biased and usually does it. So I'm going to do my best to do this intro. So ANX Versus. So first, let me tell people what this is exactly. This is a show for debate. This is a show for head up game competition. I'm here.
So let me come in and change that, right?
Okay.
No, go ahead.
So I'm here with Raymond from Vagabond Nerds.
What's going on?
We're here to talk. What's going on? We're here to talk about Detective Comics. I mean, DC Comics.
I will talk Dick Comics all day long, man.
I don't. That see.
What? Isn't that short for detective?
Huh? Is it? I don't know.
Thought,
I try to stay away from
private detective, private dick.
I try to stay away from all that. So I have no.
Try to stay away from private dicks.
Yeah.
It's just your own
and detectives. So,
and detectives. Oh, yeah. Well, you know what? Both.
Yeah.
Both. Case in point.
So anyway, let me do a quick plug and then we'll get some plugs in for you.
Sure.
And then we'll go from there. So follow us at ANX Gamecast on all social media outlets and wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Speaking of your favorite podcast, ANX Gamecast is on YouTube under AVersion TV.
One more. What's that again? AVersion
TV on YouTube.
All right.
So I need everybody to go out there, check it out. Check out the YouTube page, like some of the tracks. Make sure to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you'll be first to get all of the updates. Ray, can they find you on AVersion TV?
Not at the moment.
Okay.
I feel like you're trying to tell me something, though, about... What's it called again?
AVersion TV.
All right. We are not. We are on YouTube under Vagabond Nerds. We are on Facebook.
Facebook, okay.
Vagabond Nerds. Please like and subscribe on YouTube. Please check us out on Facebook. Most of our live shows go there.
Every other week, right?
Every other week.
Every other Saturday.
Unless it was the month of July, in which case we decided to hibernate like everybody else has since the beginning of March this year. But we did extra hibernation is what happened there.
Extra hibernation.
Extra hibernation. You can also reach out to us at vagabondnerds@gmail.com. We will almost always listen.
Almost always listen?
Almost always listen.
Let's start off like this then. So every time you have a show, I'll jump in except for today because I was busy. And you met the people I was busy with. Shout out to Roy Malarkey.
Shout out to both. Yeah. What are they on? Are they on AVersion?
They're on AVersion TV on YouTube.
I get this feeling like you want us to be a part of AVersion.
Yeah,
it's crazy, man.
Yeah, I think y'all fit right in to AVersion TV. So every time y'all do a show, I get on there and I'll hit the chat and post about Detective Comics because it seems like a lot of times y'all are talking about Detective Comics. So let me ask you this first question before we even get started. And this is not a Marvel versus DC debate. That's the default debate that everyone goes to when they talk about comic books. But that's not really what we're here to talk about today. We're here to talk about more about DC Comics. But do you prefer DC Comics or Marvel? Well, let me take that back. Do you prefer DC or Marvel? Because I don't want to make it specific to comic books. There's movies, there's TV shows, there's all kind of stuff, graphic novels.
So I'll break it down to each one of them. Let's talk about comics first. I feel that in the past decade or so, actually probably past 2 decades, even though Marvel would certainly have the jump in sales over DC, and not by a large margin, but by a margin nonetheless, DC Comics, for me, has a greater robust bullpen of writers and artists that I appreciate more. Stories are, for me, again, more developed, and can be very much more on those independent factors when, unfortunately, of course, Vertigo's no more, which is a DC imprint. But I feel that DC does take more, how should I put this, more serious content that I think, no, I know definitely reflects in their current slate of DC movies. Marvel is still very traditional and something that I've always felt. Marvel speaks to the pop culture moment, whatever we are doing at that moment in time, Marvel is absolutely going to shine. But that doesn't always work for me from a story standpoint. And I feel Marvel also has a lot of too many gimmicks that goes into their comics. No one's going to argue the success of the MCU as far as the studios go and as far as the movies go. I mean, I think we can all sit here and agree that, their movies are, faring infinitely better than DC.
As far as MCU goes, now, I'm not saying that the Sony movies or the Fox movies aren't better than some of the DC movies.
Those go hand in hand, right?
Or hand to something else.
Hand it, yeah. I gotcha. Don't point the finger at me, man. I'm gonna get kind of scared about that.
Okay.
Was he donkey punching after that? I'm just saying.
Hey. Okay, so it's a situation where I want to make sure we point out MCU as an entity, because I feel like Marvel Comics as a whole is more involved in what happens there versus what was going on with Fox and Sony. So I does think that does play a part in the conversation on which one is better. So I don't know. I don't want to say you're on the fence, but you do have a Detective Comics shirt on and a Marvel hat. So which one is it? If one just had to go tomorrow as a full entity, no more movies, no more TV shows, not new content, like it never existed. It just went away, like one of those Instagram memes. If you had to choose one, if one had to go.
If one had to go, it'd be Marvel in a heartbeat for me.
Oh,
I don't think I would think twice about it.
No.
Look, man, when it comes to the movies, DC was here first. I don't remember seeing, do I think a man or do I believe a man can shoot a web? The first movie that we saw was Do You Believe a Man Can Fly? And of course, alluding to the great Christopher Reeve and, everything that he did for the first two movies, because the last two sucked. And certainly we all can remember Michael Keaton. And if I had to say the two things that bother me both with those, with people's belief on what we're seeing now, is we see things like, well, Batman doesn't kill. We hear things like, well, why would Superman kill? But we forget the movies from the 80s where Superman still killed Zod in a much more hysterical manner, might I add. And they laughed about this death. And before, he even tortured Zod by crushing his hand and then throwing him off a cliff, And so, like, when you see that, or down an ice capade skating ring, whatever the case was. Or Michael Keaton's Batman, where he was killing thugs left and right in both movies.
So you're telling me that you'd rather have Christopher Reeves and Michael Keaton versus Avengers?
I'm telling you, I would rather see Henry Cavill and Ben Affleck, or soon to be Robert Pattinson, come up. I'm saying that those are the movies that I'm going to be invested in. Again, it goes back to Marvel's a pop culture moment at a time and place, with a couple of exceptions. I would say that you probably have Doctor Strange, you have Guardians of the Galaxy trying to move past that. They don't necessarily live in that, but everything else you're looking at is modern. It's set to that time frame. And whereas in DC, including their movies, they always the argument's always going to be is, well, Marvel sees the everyman and DC looks at gods. And I understand that point, but DC to me feels more like our current Greek mythology, more so than anything that Marvel puts out. So I would rather see a story about this individual with unlimited power trying to figure out how to live amongst society. And that's not always going to be a representation of happy-go-lucky scenarios,
So let me tell you why I don't like Detective Comics. And some of it could be timing. It's just a timing thing. Generally speaking, so you say you prefer DC Comics more than Marvel Comics as far as a comic book.
As far as comic books, hands down. Something had to go, like, see a Marvel.
So, but here's my take on it, and I think a lot of people will say the same thing. No one cares about comic books anymore, unfortunately. Like I did back in the 90s, but as we know, what's happening with comic book sales, and I think even is it Warner that currently owns DC Comics, AT&T, they put out a statement saying, hey, if this doesn't do well, this next string of books that they're trying to put out, then they're gonna scrap the comic books altogether, right? And it's not. I'm not saying it's a bad product. I'm saying I don't care about comic books anymore. I don't know what the product is. So is there could there be better story? Could some of these characters be a little bit better? Maybe, but I'm not going to invest time in them. I don't read comic books anymore. So the last time I saw the DC comic book that I was even remotely interested in was back in the 90s, where it was the death of Superman, right? And I kind of feel like DC was kind of jumping the shark there. Like, are sales going down, or things bad, or is somebody, whatever. Now all of a sudden Superman's dead. Like, that'll get some people's attention, but for how long? As soon as I hit anime and manga, that was it for me in American-based comic books and cartoons. I do consider they're usually more family friendly, the animations for DC or Marvel, and I do feel like their cartoons versus anime could be any variety of genres that you can think of. So I think it was just the timing. At the time that I stopped looking at comic books in general, Marvel or DC, the DC characters and the storylines just were not there for me at the time. So
and the time frame that you're talking about, I'm not going to disagree with you. The 90s were a lot kinder to, really not even Marvel. It was a lot kinder to Image and this onset of independent creators who had gotten tired of working with both Marvel and DC. That's what the 90s belonged to. It belonged to foil gimmicks, multi-covers, how much can we sell? We will never again, I'm a believer of this, probably see a comic book like Spawn, whose first issue sold 1 million copies. We're not going to see that again. But at the same time, though, a Spawn #1 I can go and pick up for probably about $40. A Superman #1, I don't have the shekels to even think about looking at that. Maybe a ratty one, grade 0.05, no cover, missing pages. I think I could pick up one for about 10 grand. That's still, like, we're not going to see those moments again, but I think that's why we're seeing.
But I also think that's less about the quality of the work and more just about the rarity of the item. And I think that's another thing that happened in the 90s that was unfortunate. The mass production
there was just nothing
of comic books. Now it's like it's not a whole lot of stuff from that genre that's just worth, like you said, the tens of thousands of dollars.
But we're also seeing a resurgence. I mean, look, I'll be the first one to sit there and say that COVID has absolutely COVID, right? What absolutely derailed everything. But let's not be naive to it either. It wasn't like comics weren't the only things that were derailed. It derailed everything, including movies, And so, do I think AT&T is going to go in there and pull the plug on DC like we had seen that article about, I think, sometime like in April? No, I don't believe that. I think what we're going to see is the fact that they need to understand, they got to know that at the end of the day, the comic books for both Marvel and DC, and let me stress that, both Marvel and DC, they are creating future IP content for movies that have yet to be developed.
I agree, and that's part of the argument Mike B used to make on the show. However, don't you have 50, 60 years worth of content?
Sure, but is it 50, 60 years worth of good content?
Well, if we're talking about Detective Comics, then definitely not. But I think it's a situation. I'm not saying no more comics or no more graphic novels. I think they were just talking about the paper, right? Are they talking about pulling the plug on the paper comics, right?
I think you
can still have digital, right? Digital comics, and you can still have the cartoons and animations and stuff like that, right?
So remember the first time Kindle came around? The very first time, where Kindle was a device that was created strictly for the purpose of replacing the books.
Yeah.
That shut down Barnes and Nobles?
No, but I think it was also just a whole different experience. I think there will be. I think it didn't catch on as fast as digital music did. So I think there will be a day where it does take over. Like maybe someone who's for every little kid right now that's 10 who's never picked up an actual book and going to virtual learning, even if whether it's in class and or at home with their textbooks, and has never actually used a real book. I think as they become older and want to read books and stuff, they will be less inclined to go there. So I don't think it picked up as fast. It's the same thing with video games. It hadn't picked up as fast as digital music, but I think it will eventually get there. I tried on my PSP, because I am a gamer, ANX Gamecast, right? I tried to do the digital comics on the PSP. I think there was a lot that were free when the PSP first came out. It just wasn't the same. I couldn't do it.
I wouldn't do it on a PSP either. I mean, you know, I'm looking at a tablet that's got to be at least, you know, I'm looking at a device that's got to be 10 inches or bigger, or otherwise it's just not as fun. But we are looking at something that you need to be able to tangibly hold. I have an iPad to go and look at digital comics, and I do have digital comics for sure.
Okay.
But I'm not a fan of them like I am a book. I am hunting down right now certain volumes that I need to replace in my collection, and I'm not looking at, you know, I could go and get anything I needed to have completed right now by going on to a digital format. But that's not what I want. I am strategically hunting down volumes of books that I know I can no longer get in stores because they had limited runs or they only did a couple prints.
So just to get the story, I'm gonna go get this because I don't want to pay $300 for this one comic book. So I'll go get the digital version just to get the story. Right? Is that what we're saying?
Well, what I'm saying is there's room for both. There's absolutely room for both. If there wasn't, I think we would have the layout of the comic industry. The death knell would definitely be a lot stronger than what it is, but I don't think we're seeing that. I think we're seeing a move towards independence. We're definitely seeing a move, thank you DC, away from Diamond as a publisher. And that's not to sit there and say that Diamond, as a distributor. That's not to say that Diamond distribution was bad or evil in any way, but I think someone smart enough that eventually started echoing some of the same stuff that I've echoed in the past, which is, why are we limited to just this one individual to do this? Why can't we do this ourselves? Do I think single issues as they stand currently are going to continue to be a product? I don't know. I think it'll be still on the resale market. I think we'll see single issues definitely go out, but I think what we're going to see is this shift into graphic novels, stories that are told in complete series. You're not going to have as many cliffhangers at the end of a book, or if you are, it's with the promise of another, trade coming shortly thereafter. I do believe we're going to see that. How soon? 5-10 years, maybe. DC's already tried it once with their Earth One theory, which was, we're going to put out these books under the Earth One label. They will be complete stories, 132 pages, and they're going to tell this particular story.
I think I have a couple of them upstairs. I don't know exactly what they're called, but if I were to ever get back into collecting comic books, it would not be in the comic book form. It would be in the hardcover book, and that, like you just said, might cover a whole saga.
Yep.
Right, or at least parts of it. I couldn't find one that ran consecutively. There would be one missing or two missing or whatever, right? And I wasn't going to go all over the Metroplex, shout out, looking for each individual book, right? And two, as it leans towards Detective Comics, there was nothing by way of Detective Comics that was making me want to go out and even see what was going on with the comic books. So even when I'm saying that, it's still going to be very specific to Uncanny X-Men for me. I'm not really going to jump into something else. Like if I do go get hardcover, it's going to be Uncanny X-Men because that's what I grew up on.
I could tell you right now with DC, I could hand you a collected edition of 100 Bullets, the first volume, and that would be something that you would look for. But
there's not, DC is not doing anything to make me want to read their content. They're not even doing anything that makes me want to see their movies. Like the main thing that's in my face right now is their movies. That's the only thing that's on my radar. The only other thing I see on a regular basis that's related to them is maybe a commercial for a TV show or something, right? Or something like that. And none of that interests me at all. So the only thing I'm really interested in is the movies. And if the movies were good or better, and they said this is based off of this comic book that's much better than the movie or the series or this whatever, then I'd be like, okay, maybe I will go check it out. But that's not happening either.
But so to your point though, like that's it certainly becomes taste, right? A matter of taste and opinion into what you're interested in. So let's use a movie. Let's use Martha, right?
Martha.
So,
oh my God.
But let's talk about that. Look at that scene from a different standpoint.
Do we have to?
We're going to. We're going to.
It says Detective Comics right here. Okay.
We're going to look at this. Okay. Don't look at that scene as someone who's throwing a line away that says, just Martha. Look at it instead as this, right? You're fighting this godlike creature. You have no idea what the other name is or whatever. There's two things about Batman that I think everyone needs to really kind of focus on. And one, I know every Batman's different. We always had that saying on our show from episode 1, which was, I don't care about your Batman. Meaning, you're going to have your own version of Batman. Let me have my version of Batman. But specifically to the Zack Snyder Batman in BVS. That man is broken. That man has PTSD without a doubt, all stemming back from the fact that he watched his parents die smack in front of him.
That man is also a bad actor, but go ahead.
To be debated. But you're looking through, though, and from that standpoint, someone says your mother's name, and the last thing that flashes through your mind is her being shot. Okay. Because that's what you do. It's going to stop you. Did he ham it up a little bit? To say the least. But would that be a show? Would that stop someone in their tracks? Now, I'm not sitting there saying that they become super friends afterwards by any stretch of the imagination, but that's what they sold, right? I get that. But to stop me from stabbing someone through the chest, sure. Here goes the other thing that I think a lot of people don't get about Batman that me and Jason and Sean have talked about before.
Members of Vagabond Nerds.
Members of Vagabond Nerds.
Shout out.
The bottom line is, Batman as a character, that man's insane. He is insane.
Okay.
I buy the Joker not being insane. I buy the Joker being completely aware of what he wants to do. He's just someone with no filter. But Batman, to do what he's doing, that's insanity. You're telling me you've got a clown out there killing thousands of people and you haven't put a bullet in him?
So let's talk about the Martha. I thought you were going to join in.
I wasn't going to join. I was going to leave you hanging on purpose, man.
So let's talk about that. So Mike B had the same take on the movie. And it's not even a take. Like, I agree. That's what happened. Like, I'm not disagreeing. But just because there's some great, backstory, moral, there's more to it than just the surface of bad acting and a bad line, doesn't mean that it's good. Like, I'm still there to be entertained. Are you not entertained? Like, I'm not. Like, this is bad acting. They didn't pull it off.
What would have changed that for you? What changes that scene to make it okay in your book?
It just need to be pulled off a little bit better as far as the acting. I think the acting was the worst part, and that's why I pulled in Marvel being involved in MCU versus Sony and Fox. Like, all that to me is that's all together. Like, that's still a DC fail to me if you got a bad actor in a pivotal moment in this movie, right? It's called Batman versus Superman. Or it's Superman.
Timely.
Yes.
Timely.
Or Superman versus I don't even remember the
Batman versus Superman.
Batman versus Superman. They're fighting. One of them is about to win. It's like this is the moment in the movie, right? And it just bombed. They bombed it. That whole scene was just bad. So maybe what makes it better is better acting. Maybe it's a situation where Superman looks less like he's talking to Batman and maybe he's more talking to himself, which I think that's what was trying to happen.
He's trying to warn him, hey, you tell you what, kill me, but go save my mom.
Right, but I feel like maybe it would have been better if he was like, I'm not going to bring up that analogy. Go ahead. No, you got to do it now. Okay. If it was, I can't do that.
You got to do it, man.
Okay.
You got to do it.
George Floyd.
All right.
When he was dying, called out to his mother.
Right.
Like, that's not what was happening in this movie. Like, I would have probably liked it better if it was like, I'm about to die and I'm calling out to my mom, because that's apparently what people do when they're dying, right? Regardless if the mom is still alive or not. Right. So it didn't have that impact. Like, this dude is dying and literally crying out to his mother, and he's about to die. Like, you don't think of Superman being that way. However, like, that would have made that scene more. And then he stops and, like, maybe not in the bad Batman voice, but he stops and is like, what are you talking about, Martha? Right? And then go down that path.
So to your point, I think that's what it was striving for. For some people, it rang. I'll tell you, right? Being a huge fan of it and still loving that movie.
You like that movie?
I like that movie.
What?
I enjoyed Batman vs Superman. What? To be fair to you, that took me out. Like that I was like, what the hell did he just like? I got it. I understood it immediately, but I was like,
I get it.
You could have handled it better. But I can find that in the same thing with Marvel movies. I could find scenes in every single one of those 23 films.
The pivotal scene though,
pivotal scenes. I don't know.
I don't think they bombed the. This is the climax. You know, this is the climax of the movie. This is the main point. This is what we're building up to, and they just bomb it all together. Like, completely bomb it, whether it be from acting or bad script writing or bad editing or whatever it is. I don't know that happens a lot.
It doesn't happen. I will say it doesn't happen a lot. I think what we saw for the first time in BVS was the following: studio interference. Go back and look at the director's cut for it. You know, we're about to see a director's edition for Justice League, and I'm the first one to sit there and tell you, Justice League, to me, I absolutely knew when Joss Whedon took over on the shots that he was filming. I knew what felt like Joss Whedon, because Joss Whedon is very like any director, they have the way that they film,
have their style.
They have their style.
Yeah.
Did I absolutely hate Justice League? No, but like I did tell Jason and Sean with Vagabond Nerds,
shout out,
that you could certainly feel like it was a 3 episodic cartoon from back in the 90s. And I said, that's, I think, why I don't necessarily want to say I loved it, because I didn't, but that I liked and appreciated it, because it did feel like I was watching the animated series. Now, having said that, it shouldn't feel that way when I'm watching for the first time the Justice League come to the screen. Does Zack Snyder change my mind when HBO Max releases the Snyder Cut? I hope so. I hope I look at that one and I'm just like, hell yeah, that's good. I like it. That's how it should have been. And hats off to DC for saying we are now entering our multiverse. We're going to do it before Marvel, and they proved that because they did that with Flash.
Well, they have to. And I'm not even sure if they did it before, because we already have Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse.
You can't you can't count that.
What? It's Marvel? It's Spider-Man.
It's
Miles Morales.
But you're talking about MCU proper.
I'm just saying it's a Marvel. That's a Marvel thing. It's a Marvel entity.
We're not going to get to that though, and we know for a fact in the live action universe, until we see Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness.
Right.
But DC has legitimately beat them to that punch by doing not only their crossover, but by, for the first time this year, in the Flash episode, where we met for the first time the DCEU proper Flash, and they're meeting up. So I think that they're getting to that first, and I think
but they have to. They don't have a choice. They have to do something different. Like, they have to put out a Joker, right? The Joker. They have to do something different.
Yeah. Because you're not going to find, even Marvel's not going to find lightning in a bottle twice. The bottom line is their phase 1 and their premise for the Infinity Saga, as they've so called the first 23 films, is never going to happen again. I seriously doubt I'm going to feel as excited as I did watching that climactic scene in Endgame, where you see everyone together for the first time. I don't think I'm going to get that again in a theater with Marvel.
But maybe not, but you could have gotten it with DC, but
you're right, and they failed.
And they messed up.
I agree with you.
And so do I agree that you don't have to follow the Marvel, whatever they do. Okay, I agree with that. But how many Batmans do we have now? How many Batmen do we have?
So let's talk about that.
I mean, how many Jokers do we have? How many, like, what are you doing?
Yeah. And I think it's smart, because you can, DC, this is what I feel. I feel that DC is going to try this same comic book gimmick we got in the early 90s. That in the early 90s it worked. Let us saturate the market with everyone's own style, not spending that much money one way or the other. Let me give you a Ben Affleck Batman for those who like that, because let's be realistic, or let's be honest. Ben Affleck's Batman has been the most comic book accurate Batman that we've had, period.
Doesn't mean it's good and entertaining on the big screen.
To some people it doesn't, right? To me, I got to be honest with you, it's probably he's a close tie for me with Christian Bale as my favorite Batman on screen. I'm always going to lose that argument
because of the writing and the script, or because of his acting.
Because of the presentation.
Because his acting was not like believable. That he was. It wasn't really the acting that showed me that he was just this bitter old man and angry because people are dying and he couldn't do anything about it, and buildings and his employees and blah blah blah. Like, I didn't get that from the acting. I just got that from the story. So it's just like, I'm not saying you could have put anybody in that, but I think you could have put anyone in that role and you would have still had the same outcome, which that would have been your favorite Batman because it's the closest to the Batman that you like from the comics.
No, it's a legitimate thing. Look,
Geely.
but now you're bringing in stuff to it that has nothing to do with that with what we're talking about.
J-Lo.
Right? You can't base this off of something else. Otherwise, I can tell you right now, I don't want Sparkle Boy up there, aka Robert Pattinson. But I know I've seen him in other movies, and I know he can act. I've seen Ben Affleck in other movies. Argue Argo with me, or Gone Girl, or and I can't think of the one where he was the gangster. But I know Ben Affleck can act. I know he can.
Can he? But did he act well in this movie? So regardless if he can or not.
To me, right? Like, I think so. I've got a person that I know personally can't stand Tom Cruise for anything, doesn't want to watch any of his movies, but that's not indicative of how that he acts. Certain actors act the same way all the time. It is a huge issue that I have with Will Smith. To me, whenever Will Smith's in a movie, I never see who he's playing. I see Will Smith.
That's what I brought up for that bad DC movie he was in.
Yeah.
Suicide.
Yeah.
I mean, there was no,
and I couldn't see anything.
It was just Will Smith. It was just it's from Bel Air.
But to be with Suicide Squad, at least it was fun. I had fun watching Suicide Squad.
I don't know. There were too many dark instances in that movie for me to say I had fun watching it.
I think that's probably the key thing to say. If we're talking about dark instances and it's something that you're not particularly interested in.
No, I like the dark. It just didn't seem like it fit. And then your characters, as far as the acting, didn't pull it off all the way. So the movie was just kind of just up and down, like fun, joke, dark. I killed my family, and it's just like what are we doing here?
Again, a victim of studio interference. We know that for a fact now, because it wasn't supposed to be.
But
that
I'm
way.
still putting a loss on DC. No, because your average Joe is not going to go out there and be like, man, that studio really jacked up that movie. It's going to be like, what is this? I don't want to watch
Say
anymore.
what you will. The average Joe's what's got us having the Zack Snyder cut being redone, like even presented.
Well, I don't think that's not the average Joe. That's people like you. That's the hardcore fans.
I mean, I'm not spending cash to go fly a banner in front of DC or Warner Brothers Studios.
No, but you advocate for it, right? You want to see it.
To that point, though, I would want to see anything that somebody said, hey, this was actually how the take was supposed to be. That's because of sheer interest.
And this is why I wish we had Unbiased Ann on the show, because I feel like Unbiased Ann is probably more of the average Joe than me and you when it comes to DC Comics or Marvel Comics or movies or whatever. She doesn't even know a Snyder cut exists. Yeah. She doesn't even know who Snyder is. So the average, so I would disagree that the average Joe is why we're getting it. I think we're getting it because DC has to do anything to keep their fan base happy and to generate revenue and to try to right the ship. If let's just say the DC version was the better version outside of the Snyder cut, then they know which way to go.
Yeah.
Right.
But let's be honest, the entire after Batman, no, I'm going to say it, even after Man of Steel. Okay. After Man of Steel, DC took this approach that, man, we got to jump. We're behind. We're not doing what Marvel's doing. We really need to copy whoever was running that ship at that time. I can't remember his name. I think it was Soshita something.
Jason?
No. Jason Momoa. No. They took the approach of we gotta look at what Marvel's doing, and I think that was their first bad step. Their first bad step should never have been we've got to copy.
It is a logical step though. Like if you're in the same game.
Is it your character? You've got different characters. You don't have the same structure. You're doing it on your own.
But you might be too far in the forest to see the trees from outside perspective. It's movies based off comic books.
So it's not talking
and comic book characters.
But you're not talking about that though. Like you know as well as I do. I'm taking it strictly from a studio standpoint. The moment another studio tries to copy the success of a studio that's adjacent to them or is legitimately running against them, when that happens, the studio with the original idea usually wins out. That's not a theory. That's not anything else.
But I think Marvel, from my perspective, Marvel it's just better anyway. It was going to win out regardless. However, the product that DC did put out, if they would have tried to copy what Marvel did, could have been better. Is what I'm thinking. It could have been better than what they were doing, which is start this, stop this, put this one-off thing over here, do this, all this random stuff that makes no sense. It could have been better. Do we get the Joker? No, we don't get the Joker in that instance. But do we get a better Justice League? Do we get a reboot of Suicide Squad right after it came out? No, we don't get any of that mess. What they definitely should have done was learn from Fox's X-Men to what not to do.
I'll grant you
that. But they end up kind of doing that anyway. Like, how do you have the blueprint laid out for you and you still mess it up? So should they copy exactly what Marvel did? Maybe not. However, you have multiple blueprints out of what Marvel did that didn't go well, which is X-Men and Fox. Then you have stuff that was going well and got sidetracked, which is Spider-Man and Fox. And then you have
Spider-Man and Sony.
Sony, I'm sorry, Spider-Man and Sony. And then you have what happened with the MCU, which blew up everything, right? In a good way. You have it all laid out. You still can't figure it out.
But again, look at what you're going through from a studio perspective and change during your. I want to get our comic book universe up and running off the ground. You have 3 changes at the top. You have a solid buyout that one could argue that from that point on no one really saw coming, but it happened anyway. And in the meantime, you have Marvel. Marvel banked all of its success on Iron Man, and let's be honest, they put out a good film, but that did not guarantee that it was going to be successful. When The Incredible Hulk gets released,
I don't know if I agree with that. I don't know if I agree if they banked everything on Iron Man.
Well, no, they did. Like that's in interviews. Kevin Feige goes on record as saying, "We bet it all on Iron Man and hoped that we were going to be able to continue it." They got afraid after The Incredible Hulk because that did not perform the way they do it.
Right. But you had so many, regardless if it was MCU with Marvel Studios or if it was just a Marvel product, you had so many Marvel movies that came out before Iron Man. Like the fact that we're thinking that there was,
you're not talking about, but you're talking about the MCU proper. The MCU proper doesn't start without Iron Man.
But the fact that we're thinking that Marvel Studios is going to put out one movie and if it flops we're shutting down the whole studio, it's like, come on, that's not, well, I don't believe that for 1 second.
So they had 2 movies going at the same time, right? Especially
when you start talking about the money that they have behind it with something like Disney. Look at Xbox.
But you're talking about something that came after Avengers. That golden cocaine mouse money was not available to them until after 2012.
But wasn't it still there regardless if it was available to them or not?
No, it wasn't. Because they banked everything on Iron Man. They had to make Iron Man sell.
So Marvel Studios at the time was not a part of Disney.
No. Paramount had Marvel Studios.
Okay, but still a huge company. It's not like we're talking about.
You're right.
Not like we're talking about Lionsgate back 20 years ago. You see what I'm saying?
But I don't. I think you're thinking that they had, because of the success that we see today. A Marvel movie comes out. We know that for the most part, it's a $750 million or greater return on their budget. But look at Ant-Man. Look at not Guardians. Look at Doctor Strange.
Ant-Man's trash.
Look at some of the other stuff where they're not banking $1 billion. But to that point, the first phase of Marvel, phase 1, when you talk about Iron Man, you talk about the Incredible Hulk, Thor, Captain America, and then Avengers. Okay, I'm sorry, and Iron Man 2.
All right.
Iron Man 1 comes out. they were floored. Okay, the Incredible Hulk comes out against the Dark Knight. Did not do Iron Man money. Suddenly, shit, can we continue this? Can we go on? You have Iron Man 2 come out. Iron Man 2 was not as strong as its predecessor. People were a little bit concerned. Kevin Feige's making everything they have. It goes to reason, and it goes without saying that the first credit scene with Nick Fury, Feige, again, on record, has said, we threw that out there just to say, if it works, it works. We can get people interested. If it doesn't, then, well, at least we had fun making this movie, right? So then you get Thor coming out. Thor was not met with great praise. It was liked. It was well liked, but it was not something to do. And then, like they said, in order for the Avengers to work, it all had to go on the Captain America movie, and we have to spend at least the first quarter of it with CGI, which at times doesn't look necessarily good, with Chris Evans' face on someone else's body, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this, if we can sell him as a lead character, then Avengers will work, right? And then when Avengers came out,
I get, but here's my thing. Outside of comparing it to what happened after,
mm-hmm.
I'm talking about what happened like before.
If you go before, you're still going with DC proper.
No, I'm talking about X-Men. I'm talking about Marvel. I'm talking about Spider-Man. I'm talking about all these different movies. Blade got 3 movies. I mean, the fact that we're talking about an Iron Man that came out and it did good, and that no more movies would have came out after that if it would have been, if it would have been considered a flop. I just don't believe that.
Well, that's in anything you see, man.
I just don't believe that.
How many movies do we know that did decently that we didn't even know were comic book movies?
But you say like that with anything. I just had a conversation with Terrence, shout out, about like the Yakuza video game.
Yep.
And he said, oh, it has a resurgence. It's doing better. It's selling. It's moving units, right? Like, it's not, like, compared to what exactly? So, but they put out 7 of those over here. The franchise as a whole has only sold 11 million copies worldwide. So it's kind of like they're still like Microsoft, for example, with the Xbox. Xbox was a huge flop, but they had enough money and the wherewithal to just be like, no, we're gonna put it out again as a 360, and we're gonna go for it again. I just think with everything that was happening in the comic book movie world, X-Men, Spider-Man, I keep bringing them up, even with anything that was going on with DC, because there was a Superman movie that came out around that time too, wasn't it? It wasn't Man of Steel, was the one before that.
Well, there were still DC movies being made.
Right. So with that whole genre as a whole, I think you still look and say, no, that's still something here. Let's keep going.
There is, and to that point, again, DC, without a doubt, DC went first. To me, the godfather of soul, so to speak, for Marvel will always be the first Blade. That first Blade, to me, everyone looks at the first X-Men and the first Spider-Man as this is when we entered the golden age. But no, it was Blade. Go back to 1998, this little known film, and Marvel was so afraid to put their name on it that when you go back and you look at it, you don't see an association with Marvel at all. What you see is a Marvel studio. It's a little bitty print, as they're going through the credits. So you barely recognize it. That within itself, they were trying to figure it out. Go back and look at X-Men, first X-Men.
It could be them trying to figure it out. It also could be them trying to distance themselves from comic books.
They were trying to distance themselves because they were Marvel as an industry, Marvel Studios, Marvel Entertainment. Let's go with Marvel Entertainment. Yeah, Marvel Entertainment had just filed for bankruptcy.
Right. So why would you want to put your name on a movie that's coming out? You see what I'm saying? Like
name recognition. If I have any chance of that movie making money,
you already know what it is, though. We know what it is.
Even at the time.
We don't have to put Marvel on there for us to know what Blade is.
Right.
But if you put Marvel on there and unbiased and knows that Marvel's a comic book and that's nerdy and I don't want to deal with that, then I won't go watch it. But if you just tell me some kind of fighting vampire movie, okay, I might go watch that. It's not nerdy comic book, because you got to remember.
Did you not take the chance with Iron Man?
Take what chance?
By saying it was a Marvel film. That's how it was marketed.
Yeah, but that's 10 years later almost. What I was about to get to was the 90s was a different beast when it comes to. So, for example, me and I'm saying we're in a whole different age group. It's only a few years apart, but that is a big difference. Back when she was in high school, it was not cool or fashionable to
no, it wasn't.
to like comic books.
That was
It wasn't.
Talk about having to be closeted for that.
Right. Like you were looked at as the nerd or the geek. Now, 2000, 2005, 2006, 2007, whenever Iron Man came out, 2008, it was starting to become cool.
Well, even before that,
to like comic books. It was becoming cool to watch anime and to be nerdy. Like that was a thing. So yes, like here's my nerdy stamp of approval, putting Marvel in big letters right on the front. You know, like yes, stamp that. Like you know,
DC had done that. I think the first mention of coolness with comic books probably comes in 93, 94 with The Crow. Because everyone was like, where did this come from? What is this story? And granted, they try to present it differently than the story, and I am still very much a fan of the original graphic novel. But that, to me, was a touching point of, man, did you see The Crow? What is that? No, dude, it's based off this comic book. Get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
And then for those of us who knew, we were like, huh. It's kind of a cool story. It's not Batman. It's not Superman.
But see, they didn't have to market it as a comic book, or they should not have marketed it as like a comic book thing. It's like,
and that still happens today.
Brandon Lee.
That still happens today. Look at
look
at something like Road to Perdition.
Yeah,
great example.
Yeah.
Road to Perdition, Tom Hanks movie.
Yeah,
about a gangster, strictly from a comic book.
Right.
You know,
but that was not really today. That was 2004.
So let's take a look at something today.
Even the ones that come out that are based off comics or graphic novels, I can't think of the name of the movies. The commercials though still would lead you to believe that it was one of these superhero movies. You know, like they show people with powers and they show people doing stuff, and it's like it looks like if you didn't know better, if you blinked the wrong way, you would have thought it was a DC or Marvel movie.
Tom Cruise and Live, Die, Repeat, independent comic. That was based off a movie. You have something like The Losers, which I got to hand it to them. They actually did do the DC logo and the Vertigo logo. Still I feel one of the most underrated comic book movies, which had a ton of Marvel stars that would go on to feature different characters. I love Chris Evans because what a lot of people don't or have just now started to realize is his Captain America role was one of like 5 different comic book roles he has played in his lifetime.
So no, I'm glad you said that because it's bringing me to another point on why I don't like DC comics, because we spend a lot of time talking about Marvel. I don't blame you. It is the superior brand. Like that's.
Well, I'm bringing it in so that I can draw you in. So
DC. So the DC thing that I hear a lot about is DC is you had who was fighting the Nazis? Was Superman?
Are you talking about
Captain America?
You're talking about today? Because I think it's all of us.
No, not today. And it's not all of us, unfortunately.
No, shit.
Some people are like, yeah, go Nazis. And it's like, what? Who was fighting Nazis back in? World. It was
honestly
claim to fame.
Everybody has taken their shots at Nazis,
right? But I mean, I'm talking about claim to fame as far as this is what put you on the map. This is what got the whole country behind you as like an entity, as a thing. Like we want to support you.
If you're gonna go with Captain America, that's not necessarily true because Superman had already been doing that. Superman.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. It was Superman first,
right.
I don't like Superman. I don't like Captain America. The whole thought of justice and peace and kill the Nazis, it's not my thing, right? I don't care anything about that. I don't feel like DC has come, at least again, when I stopped reading comic books, I came too far from that. It was still kind of in this, and what I feel like is even though DC came first, I still feel like DC is a generic superhero, which makes sense because they did come first. Anything else, right, is maybe a copy. Like not a copy, but the influence is coming from DC, right? So you are the generic. Like people say that as like think I'm trying to diss them. I kind of am. Wait, I got a button.
Yeah,
diss. I got a button for that.
What was that?
So
baby?
It is kind of a diss, but it's kind of like you are the generic default superhero, and that's not necessarily appealing to me. So when you move forward and you talking about those late 90s, when I was into comic books and I was into comics, man, X-Men cartoon was on TV. You talking about they're doing like you said, pop culture, like what's happening now.
Okay, well I'm gonna hit pause. I'm so glad you brought that up.
Okay,
but you're gonna sit here and tell me,
all right,
that the X-Men animated series had deeper subject matter than the Batman Adventures.
Than the who?
The Batman Adventures.
Batman Adventures. Which one was that?
So we're talking about the Batman animated series. That's Kevin Conroy voicing Batman.
The cartoon.
The cartoon that everybody knows.
No, it did. You know why?
No, of course it did.
Yes,
man.
it did. Yes, it did. Come on.
I will tell you.
And maybe it did. Maybe I'm too biased in this situation, but it had things that related to me more as a minority in this country. You're talking about mutants who were out there, not that black people were out there fighting for other people's rights, which we do now, but that's two separate conversations. But you got a group of X-Men out there fighting to save humanity who hate them because they're different. Yeah. And it was all and then you had Magneto as Malcolm X, you had Professor X as Martin Luther King, and then you had this thing.
Can I side note real quick? Let's side note.
Okay.
So I will say that
all right.
MCU, the rumor going around right now, Denzel Washington as Magneto. I actually would love that, because you've got to update that timeline for your universe and where we're at right now. Go back to the civil rights, because you can no longer go back as far as the Holocaust, which was originally the premise for both of those. But to hit the civil rights era, I would absolutely be on board for that. But that appealed to you on a personal level, whereas when I look at the Batman animated series, so
I can't even, let me put it this way, for Batman, I can't even think of a specific deeper storyline that happened in those cartoons outside of good guy versus bad guy.
Storyline, I probably, man, I almost want to give you my password or my copies of this, because you're talking the first episode that aired was Heart of Ice, I believe back in a 91, 92. It was a personal story. So when we talk about X-Men dealt with more of a societal issue. The Batman animated series dealt with in-depth character development. When you look at Mask of Phantasm, when you look at the development of how they actually portrayed, Mr. Freeze. I never saw Mr. Freeze as anything more than a two-dimensional character, but Heart of Ice, that episode specifically, where it shows a character development in an animated form that I'd never seen before, and as an adult today, still holds up. When you talk about they dealt with child abuse, but here's the problem with what we're talking about now. The outside of the Mask of Phantasm, because that was like PG-13, right? I'm not even bringing. I haven't even said anything other than the name on the Mask of Phantasm.
Right, but outside of that, we're talking about shows that were made for children. So to me, now don't get me wrong, I watched it all because that's what I did. You know, those shows were boring to me. The Batman animated series was boring. The graphics weren't even as good as what was going on the X-Men side. The characters, the superhero, Batman isn't even a superhero. The superheroes were cooler on the X-Men side. On the Spider-Man side, the villains were cooler. I mean, come on, it's a difference of opinion, because I'll tell you right now,
having studied the animation art of both series, I'm always going to go with Batman. But I will tell you,
they just weren't super detailed. It was just kind of.
But that was on purpose, like that.
It was Martha was on purpose, but that doesn't mean it's good.
Yeah, but for that animated show, it was. I'll argue the merits of that. I'm not, and again, let's get something straight. I am not arguing that I did not like the X-Men animated series. I do, but I think the art and the storytelling were better on the Batman animated series. I appreciated more of what they did with Spider-Man on their animated series, on keeping it light, but still dealing with some of the stuff that we're used to seeing Peter Parker deal with.
But this also could be a situation of not throwing your business out there, but different age groups.
It could be. It very well could be.
Because, I mean, when I was watching it...
Young bastard.
I'm just saying. When I was watching it, I was a kid. It was aimed towards me. And
I was a teenager at the time,
right? And so some of that stuff, it was just kind of boring. I'm not saying looking back did it have some meaning now, but if, like I said, this conversation about my dislike for DC Comics, like,
which I think is
it's just like all these different things play into it. Like at every step of the way, I've preferred Marvel, and then there was a step of the way where I preferred anime and manga over Marvel and DC. Like both of them got shut out.
Yeah.
It's just like, nope. It's like DC, okay, cool. Oh, Marvel, okay, move DC. Oh, manga and anime, move Marvel.
Which that's where my son's at right now.
Hey,
like my son's 10.
Shout out.
And he's moved past DC. He's like, no, I want to see this anime stuff. Like this is to him.
So I don't want to say I was the same. No, I was the same age when I was first introduced to anime. The difference now is he has a lot more to choose from than when I was 10.
Of course.
There was Sailor Moon, there was Dragon Ball Z that came on early Saturday mornings, and that was it.
And he's absolutely doing that right now. Like he's lending himself to this wide variety that we have because of Netflix, because of YouTube and everything else.
Yeah. Shout out.
But going back to that, it could just end up being like I did not come on the show to change your mind, because like we've talked about this before. Like I'm not going to be able to change your mind on this.
You might be
how you really feel on that, right?
Well, I think if there was something maybe inaccurate or something I didn't remember correctly, then you could, because like I just remember X-Men being better than Batman.
There was a time
I remember MCU movies being better than the current DC movies.
So
I mean,
there was a time in the comic books in the 90s where I definitely lended myself to Marvel because of what they were doing.
Shout out.
But once those core creators that I was following, because I learned at a young age, let me go to who this person's writing, because this is what I'm enjoying.
Well, or the art style. Sometimes it wasn't even about the writing. It was just, who drew this? Like you could tell.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely. I could sit there and no feet on this character. A Jim Lee book just came out,
right.
Or which I love, when he did Batman for the first time, the cover splash page was Batman coming at you with his feet, because he was tired of people saying you don't draw feet. But let's be honest, you didn't draw feet. But as I've progressed, what I found is the more adult-driven stories, and I don't mean as in Dick Comics.
Hey.
But the more adult-driven stories that were meant for my age group have come hands down from DC. When I talk 100 Bullets, when I talk about DMZ, when I talk about how they handle Batman right now and the structure that they're doing, I'm not looking at just who they are. I'm looking at the writing styles. When we talk about when you have a Justice League book, when it's talking about a whodunit and why, with something like Identity Crisis or whatever, those books that I'm being driven to are DC. When it comes to the movies, for me, I am driven to this. I don't ever go into a Marvel movie not thinking.
Watch what you say.
Not thinking that the hero is going to win. Like, I just don't.
That's why Endgame was so not Endgame, Infinity War. That's why that was so dope.
That's why I love that movie, because I told Jason, I was like, no way does Disney have the balls to pull off the Infinity War ending like the comic books. They're not killing all their or half. That's not how it's going to end. When it hit, I was floored, because I was like, good on you. Yeah. You had the guts to do it.
It was still anticlimactic for people like us, because we knew they were going to fix it.
Of course.
But everyone else was just angry, which I didn't. I was like,
they were legitimately pissed. Did you really just kill off,
Black Panther?
Spider-Man, Black Panther
just came out.
Yeah, like you just killed off your first black hero?
And,
like, what the hell?
And you killed him first? I'm like...
And it was like, calm down.
There was already stories about Black Panther 2 coming out at the time, so you knew he was coming back anyway.
He'd already filmed scenes for Endgame. Come on, guys.
Yeah.
But that was a legitimate pull, and I was very proud. But with DC, with some of their comics, and again, their overall Superman, I know how it's going to end, but sometimes, and this is what I appreciate about DC, the way they get there is different. They can take a road that's not expected. Marvel has become formulaic. They really have, especially their trailers. You're going to show me this dark opening, then you're going to next show me the hero, then you're going to sit there and show me what for all intents and purposes is going to be the climactic battle, and then you're going to end the trailer on a joke. Tell me which Marvel trailer I just spoke about.
But tell me
All of them?
But tell me what's wrong with that trailer. Nothing.
It depends.
It's dope.
It depends. It depends on the
works.
trailer.
Everybody's liking it.
I got to be honest with you. The movie that I thought I was going to hate the most is my favorite movie from them, and that's Guardians of the Galaxy.
I still haven't seen it yet.
I'm telling you, man.
It's becoming a running joke on our show. Like that one and the second one, and I just haven't seen them yet. But here's my thing with DC. At what point do I stop giving you chances?
That's it for today, guys. Thanks for watching ANX Versus. Make sure to check out part 2 of this episode, only on AVersion TV. See you next time.